Good evening to all of you. I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to this evening program. We have a very distinguished speaker with us for the day. For the benefit of those who are new to Krishnamurti and his teachings, I would like to make a few observations. Some of you may be aware that Krishnaji traveled for almost 65 years all over the world giving talks and left behind a treasure of his teachings in the form of his public talks, dialogues, question and answer sessions, and interviews. We have a huge collection of such material in the archives. Almost 100 books have been published in English, with a lot of unpublished material still available in the archives. We have in the official Krishnamurti channel on YouTube about 500 full-length videos and excerpts, and we have a collection of about 2000 audio recordings. The two main objectives of Krishnamurti Foundation India are to carry on the educational work that Krishnamurti initiated. We have 6 schools spread across India, one in Varanasi, one in Rishi Valley, one near Pune, one near Bangalore, one in Chennai, and one, the 6th one, a little south of Chennai. Apart from carrying on with the educational work, we have a significant amount of publications work. We have brought out about 100 books in English with translations in about 9 or 10 Indian languages. And some of you may be aware that Krishnamurti's works have been translated in more than 50 languages in the world. We publish also newsletters in several languages from the headquarters of the foundation in Vasantpur in Chennai and from our other centers. Recently, we have brought out a booklet called The Real Crisis, consisting of some excerpts from Krishnamurti's talks. As we are all aware, we are living in challenging times. I'm saying challenging times not merely because of COVID-19, but we face really a massive challenge as humanity. Politically, religiously, economically, environmentally, educationally. In every walk of life, things seem to be falling apart. And Krishnaji long back answered this question, what is the real crisis? That has been posted in the website. I welcome you all once again to this evening program. And I would now like to request Dr. Sailesh Shirali, one of the anchor persons of the Center for Continuing Dialogue, to introduce the distinguished speaker for the evening. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am Shailesh Shirali, and I'm here to introduce Dr. Vandana Shiva to you. She will be delivering this CCD talk this evening. Readers of J. Krishnamurti's writings will be familiar with his deep connection with nature and his extraordinarily fine and sensitive depictions of landscapes and trees and natural life in general. They will know that his relationship with nature went beyond poetry and writing. He was deeply concerned with the quality of man's relationship with nature and what our activities are doing to animal populations and forests across the earth. In many of his talks, he asked about what we are doing to the whale populations in our oceans. And he asked, what is our relationship with nature? How do we look at nature? Do we look at a tree without projecting ourselves and utilizing it for our convenience? Is there a love of the earth, or is there only usage of the earth? Is it possible to use the earth as it is meant to be used? And he added, earth is there to be loved, to be cared for, not to be divided as yours and mine. Against this backdrop, it is most appropriate that this year's CCD lecture is being given by Dr. Vandana Shiva, who has been passionately involved with conservation work for the past 4 decades. She has been variously described as a Gandhian eco-activist, an agroecologist, and a modern-day revolutionary who has been fighting a heroic battle on behalf of humanity and ecologically exploited natural systems that we use. Dr. Shiva is a physicist by training. She received her PhD in the philosophy of physics in 1978 from the University of Western Ontario, working in an area of quantum physics connected with the work of David Bohm. Soon after, she began to initiate and also get involved in environmental movements. Notably, she got involved with the remarkable Chipko movement begun by peasant women in her native region in the Garhwal Himalaya. Her work on agriculture began in 1984, following the violence in Punjab and the Bhopal gas disaster. In 1991, she founded the Navdanya movement to protect the diversity and integrity of living resources, particularly native seeds. In 2004, she started a college for sustainable living in the Doon Valley of Uttarakhand in collaboration with the Schumacher College of UK. Dr. Vandana Shiva has worked extensively in the area of intellectual property rights and biodiversity. Among other things, she has challenged the biopiracy of neem and basmati rice and wheat. She has been particularly concerned with the destructive role played by powerful corporates. She has worked extensively with women's groups and grassroots organizations, not only in India, but also in Africa, Latin America, and elsewhere. She has won numerous awards for her work, including the Right Livelihood Award in 1993, which is widely regarded as an alternative Nobel Prize. She writes about herself that her ecological journey started in the forest of the Himalaya, and it was from these forests that she has learned what she knows about ecology. In her writings, she recalls the songs and poems her mother composed about the trees and forests and India's forest civilizations. It is therefore particularly apt that we are here to listen to her at this moment, and it is against the backdrop of the recent disaster which took place in Uttarakhand. Let us warmly welcome Dr. Vandana Shiva and look forward to an instructive and important lecture from her.
I'm so happy to be able to join the Krishnamurti Foundation with this talk on humans and nature. This was so close to Krishnaji's heart and so close to the education he shaped, and very privileged to be a Krishnamurti parent with my son Karthikeya having gone to Rishi Valley, and I learnt so much in my interactions with the school and grew to love so many of you as dear personal friends. So first, my love to all of you whom I've met, who I know. I want to begin by quoting from Krishnaji himself, where he asks, what is nature? There's a great deal of talk about an endeavor to protect nature, the animals, the birds, the whales, the dolphins, to clean the polluted rivers, the lakes, green fields, and so on. But nature is not to put together by thought, as religion is, as belief is. Nature is the reality. Nature is the ant and the bee and all the living things. Nature is the river. All these mountains with dark blue valleys. The universe is part of the world. One must have a feeling for all of this. Not destroy it, nor kill for one's pleasure. Nature is part of life. We grew out of the seed, the earth. We are part of all that. But we are rapidly losing the sense that we are animals like others. We have to really be in communion with nature, not verbally caught in the description of it, but be part of it, be aware, feel that you belong to all that, be able to have love. And it is this communion and this oneness that was broken, not because human evolution brought us this place, but the violence of colonialism required a separation of humans from nature, and separation of humans from each other, with the idea that the colonizing powers were somehow superior, and that's why they had to create civilizing missions. I've written many books to understand why is it that certain communities, like the community that inspired me in ecological activism, the community of Chipko, how do they not give up this communion with nature? How do they continue to remember they're part of nature? And why are others constantly forgetting? So I wrote my book, Staying Alive, and it does break my heart that the village Raini, from where the first Chipko action started with Gaura Devi, is exactly the village where the current disaster of the 7th of February 2021 took place. The people were saying, if you destroy these forests, you destroy the mountains. These mountains are too fragile. They cannot take this violence. A 1970 Alaknanda flood had triggered those actions. We've had the 2013 Kedarnath Mandakini river floods, and now we have this one. We don't seem to remember the teachings of Krishnaji, teachings of our ecological civilization. But take along with it the fact that I would physically have been with you today, and I look forward to it. But we had the coronavirus, we had the lockdown, we had a pandemic. We know that the glaciers are melting because of industrialization based on fossil fuels, which have been mining 600 million years of nature's work in fossilizing living material, plants and animals, and putting it underground. The tragedy now and in 2013 were both about glacial melt. But the same reasons that are contributing to the melting of glaciers are also contributing to the pandemic. I've written a book called Soil Not Oil, where I started to work on IPCC data and said, let's not treat it as fragments, let's treat it as the food system as a whole. What does an industrial food system involve? Using chemical fertilizers, using fossil fuels, giant machinery, transporting food all over the world, food miles, packaging, invading into forests to grow GMO soya, most of which goes for biofuel and animal feed. Add all of this together, it's about 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions. But when you invade into the forests, all the scientific literature is showing us that every recent epidemic has emerged from the forests where a virus was not a disease for the animals or local communities, but becomes a spillover effect, whether it be the Ebola, or it be the HIV, or it be the Zika, or it be SARS, and now the corona. So the same system that is giving us climate change is also giving us pandemics. And it makes us very, very vulnerable to the pandemics. The figures are so clear. 9.2% are the increased risks of dying if you have diabetes, which comes from bad food, the same bad food system that's giving us climate change, the same invasive system that is destroying our forests. And if you have cancer, which comes from the toxics, then it's 7.6% higher risks. So the diseases, the climate change, and the pandemics all come from the same system of separation. And assuming that the earth is dead, and the earth did not suddenly disappear as the living system, as Gaia, as Pachamama, as Vasundhara, and we call ourselves Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The earth has one family. That's the civilization we are. And we're forgetting that she's Vasundhara and we are one family. And there's divisions and separations constantly getting deeper into our minds and into our lives. The idea that nature is dead was constructed, as Krishnaji says. It's not, nature is not a construct. But the idea that nature is dead is a construct. So Bacon basically wrote, he sought to destroy the idea of a living world and to replace it with a new ethic that not only sanctioned but celebrated the exploitation of nature. Nature was defined as a machine. Descartes said the rest of creation is nothing but material, dead material, Kant said, as far as non-humans are concerned, we have no direct duties. They're merely the means to an end, and we are the higher end. It's been called anthropocentrism. I also call it ecological apartheid. This separation is what has created the crisis and havoc we are in. This is the separation that Krishnaji, through his teachings, was constantly trying to overcome. Descartes said that if you hear a cry when you are chopping up an animal, it's not a deer or an owl that is crying. It is just the creaking of a machine. Now that mechanistic mindset is what all constructed knowledge has become. And we have witnessed, whether it be the crisis that our farmers are trying to address by coming out in hundreds of thousands. As they say, we are fighting for the soul and the soil of India, because the soil and the soul of India knows that the soil and we are one. The word humus is what is at the root of the word human. The word Adam is derived from the word Adamus, the Hebrew word for soil. We are the earth, we are the soil, we are nature. And taking care of her means taking care of ourselves and our future generations. Why was this separatism of the mind and this mechanistic mind imposed? Interestingly, Bacon was writing his book around the time of the creation of the East India Company. I think he was the Chancellor, but he lived from 1561 to 1626. 1600 is when the East India Company was created. Now, if you know this mountain is sacred, are you going to mine it? If you know these forests support life, are you going to log them? If you know this river sustains all of the Indo-Gangetic plain, that's why the Mother Ganga is holy. Are you going to build dams at every few feet and keep blasting the mountains so that the mountains come crumbling down? I've done studies on this for the 2013 disaster. Wherever there was a landslide, underneath there was a tunnel for a hydroelectric project. And these are the youngest mountains, and we treated them as sacred. That's why we have the Child Harm, in order to not violate the sacred earth. Boyle, who wrote the Boyle's Law, also said the idea of veneration of nature is an impediment of man's empire over lesser creatures. And of course empires were created, and empires are still being created. Bacon wrote a book called Temporis Partus Masculinus, the masculine birth of time. And that's why I've said that this is a construct. And I talk so much about earth as living and women as alive and creative and productive. As my dear friend Caroline Merchant has said, the removal of animistic organic assumptions about the cosmos constituted the death of nature, the most far-reaching effect of the scientific revolution. Because nature was not viewed as a system, was now viewed as a system of dead inert particles moved by external rather than inherent forces, the mechanical framework itself could legitimate the manipulation of nature. Moreover, as a conceptual framework, the mechanical order had associated with it a framework of values based on power, fully compatible with the directions taken by commercial capitalism. So the mechanical assumptions and colonialism and commercial capitalism are one piece. And I feel so grateful that because of the wonderful learning Karthikeya had, he has written the most recent book that I have with me. It is called Oneness versus the 1%. Because we now are at this moment where we can reclaim our oneness with the earth and protect her and love her, as Krishnaji says. Or we can continue her conquest. But the conquest is carrying on now with the fascinating new group of players. You could literally call them the New East India Company, who are the New East Indian Company, a small number of technology barons who made their money through deregulation of their trade while monopolies and patents. So they could, so many of my books that are out of print, Google never took permission from me, but Google Books sells the stuff they've stolen here. They just go to libraries, scan and photocopy all the data of the world. The Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsoft are collecting it. And we are part of nature. We are alive. But we are now becoming the new raw material. The raw material so that our data is mined. How our minds function, that is the surveillance that is at work. How our body functions, our temperature, our blood pressure. There is a whole new mining taking place. And as the Google Chief of Life Sciences has written, and I've just done a book called The Future of Food, Health and Humanity, responding to 3 patents. One patent is on fake food. An impossible burger made in the lab, fake meat. Well, you want to eat meat, eat meat. You want to be vegetarian, eat vegetarian. But why fake meat in the lab with 14 patents? Why breast milk made in the lab? Rather than create social systems where mothers can feed their babies without being prevented from doing so. And of course, anemia is so big in India, not because we don't have the beauty and diversity of iron-rich crops, including the Sesbania, the drumstick tree. We now have a Google patent. You won't imagine it. Google has a patent on introducing metallic nanoparticles, 10 to the power minus 9, into our blood with no testing done, no safety requirement, as a solution to anemia. And as the Google chief says, we have to defeat Mother Nature. That mentality of Bacon is now alive with the convergence of the new biotechnologies, the GMOs. I have been to Rishi Valley so many times and discussed with the young children the issue of GMOs. The convergence of information technologies and digital technologies and the information of new kinds of currencies. So another patent application is for March of last year, just when the corona was hitting, is a patent application for a world patent 060606. It's Microsoft talking about a patent, a business patent, it's a business patent for mining human data, processing it through algorithms, assessing your value through what you are worth in their world of digital dictatorship, and assigning you a cryptocurrency. We have been reduced to users of machines rather than thinking, conscious human beings, one with an amazing universe, a living earth. More than ever before, we need to remember and live Krishnaji's teachings. As he says, if there is communion between you and nature, then you can commune with man. That the fragmentation of human society in so many divisions right now, I don't have to tell you, we're all living through it. That fracture won't be overcome till we establish our oneness with nature. We have lost all sense of relationship in which there is not only a verbal statement of affection and concern, but also this sense of communion which is not verbal. And I would add, in Krishnaji's time, it was words that played tricks. In our times, it is data that will be used to play tricks, including manipulating our minds, to be consumers, to not even know your own sense of sensibility, your responsibility, your consciousness. It's the end to knowledge, it's the end to wisdom, it's the end to responsibility, it's the end to love. And Krishnaji repeatedly said, it is a sense that we are all together, that we are all human beings, not divided, not broken up, not belonging to any particular group or race, or to some idealistic concepts, but that we are all human beings and we are all living in this extraordinary, beautiful earth. And I would come back to the earlier quote. We grew out of the seed, the earth, and we are part of all that, but we are rapidly losing the sense that we are animals like the others. Being animal, being wild, in oneness with nature, will be the root of freedom in our times. We will either be chained and enslaved through invisible digital chains. I have fought against patenting of seed all my life. The new patenting is through digital mapping. Sit far away, take all the seeds of the world, just do a genomic map. If we had genetic engineering of the first generation then, when I used to come to Rishi Valley, you now have gene editing, as if life is a word program to be cut and pasted. But for one change you make in one part of a genome, there are 1,500 unpredictable changes. This is not precision. It is violence at the genetic level. For our young children who come to you, the best come to you, and you, having known how beautifully Karthikeya evolved through his education in Rishi Valley, you have such an important role to play, the KFI Foundation, in this time. And I look forward to working with you, to show how our relationship with the earth, recognition that the earth is living, love for the earth, is where we sow the seeds of hope for our future generations. There's a lot of work to do. But to not do this work would not just be sowing the seeds of hopelessness. It would, in our times, ensuring collapse.
Humanity has had so destructive a relationship with nature that the possibility of recovery to a healthy state seems remote. Is there any hope for humankind, or have we crossed the point of no return? If so, how can this transition come about?
First, I don't think it's humanity as a whole that is at war with the planet. Otherwise we wouldn't have movements of the kind we are having. We wouldn't have the young children of Fridays of the future. We wouldn't be having the Chipko women who are still fighting to protect the Himalaya. We wouldn't have the amazing women I work with who are saving seeds and doing organic farming. Now, I started to save seeds and started Navdanya because the mechanical mind was now pretending even the seed is their machine and invention. We said, no, it's not. So my hope comes from the fact that starting in '87, we made a transition. We made a transition and shown that you can protect the earth and have enough for human beings. We can grow enough food while conserving biodiversity. And it's not the case that the kind of powers that were unleashing the war against the earth are now quiet. They are more intense than ever before. But the transition that we need is A, continue the work that our independence movement did, continue the work of the movements of the 70s like Chipko, continue the work of that Krishnamurti Foundation schools have done. I mean, look at the beautiful campus that Rishi Valley is. I haven't been to Shayadri, but I have been to Rajghat and worked with Rajghat too. So the philosophy is right there. What we have to be particularly sensitive as well as creative about is the forces of division are now trying to divide movements at a time where we need to unite. There is nothing like a separate climate movement, a separate biodiversity movement, a separate water movement. All of these are interconnected, and none of this is separate from the right to food. So the separation of humans and nature also led to some people thinking in silos. The people in right to food didn't care how the food was grown. The people in growing food didn't care if someone went hungry. That no one should go hungry. While the climate is also addressed, while biodiversity erosion is reversed, is all part of that interconnectedness and non-separation. And the reason I have hope and the reason I have confidence is, I've had my share of good attacks by the trolls and the mafias and the powers and the corporations. But the joy of working with nature as one with nature does not get taken away by those attacks. And that's why the education you all are involved in, to sow the seeds of love for nature, and through love for nature, love for humanity, is the transition that we need.
In modern times, we see a steady growth of very large corporations. This had a catastrophic effect on the environment. Not only the natural environment, but also on the human environment. Through the misuse of data. Is there any hope of combating this trend when it stems from basic human greed?
Human greed is nourished just like human love is nourished. And education and culture have a lot to do with which value is nourished. Now, we've lived through 30 years of corporate rule, globalization, World Trade Organization, which made greed look good. Yeah, greed is good. Films were made, greed is good. And the greedy became the robber barons of our times. But there were robber barons earlier, and we had a corporation earlier, East India Company. Now, most people don't realize that the farmers sitting on the borders of Delhi have 1857 in their signs. They have not forgotten that the peasant movement began with the fight against the East India Company, and they defeated the first corporation of the world. Ordinary peasants joined together, and the movement spread through bread. They used to give bread to each other, and if you accepted the bread, then you were part of the movement. Because if you talked, you were hung on a tree. Millions were killed. But the movement did not die. And India, of course, became free of the East India Company. Then we became free of the British in 1947. Now it is time for all humanity to be free, but free in oneness with nature. And that's why my thinking is that human rights and human freedom will not be protected if the rights of the earth and all her species are not protected. And the rights of Mother Earth and the rights of human being as one is the place where our unity will become a force bigger than the force of 4 greedy big technology barons and their corporations, 4 greedy chemical companies and seed corporations, which I call the poison cartel, 4 greedy corporations that monopolize trade, and that's the subject of the protests of the farmers, and 4 greedy junk food makers. I cannot even understand how they can be allowed to sell food that creates disease. We know ultra-processed food is at the root of chronic diseases. I'm very happy that I have participated in Satyagraha. to keep our good food alive, defend our mustard, defend our coconut, defend our biodiversity. I think respecting the legacy that we've received that is good for the earth, because there's a legacy that's very bad for human beings, the caste system and everything else, we can create a whole new possibility, unity with nature and unity among humans. One humanity on one planet. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam can be a very radical concept in this period of colonizing the world with big data.
We grew up hearing industrialize or perish. Are you advocating do not industrialize and survive?
As far as industrial agriculture is concerned, I happen to have dedicated my life to both understand what it is as well as create alternatives. Having studied quantum theory and the foundations of non-locality and non-separability in quantum theory, I ended up in 84 looking at agriculture because Punjab, the land of the Green Revolution, erupted in violence. And that was the first introduction of industrial farming to countries of the south, and the lovely name called the Green Revolution. Punjab farmers arose against this in 1984. So we were told without industrial agriculture we will starve, industrialize it or perish. More people are today hungry, the soils are dead, the butterflies have gone, the climate has been devastated. So we have to de-industrialize definitely agriculture in our food system. And we have to do this to survive. So I would say ecologize and live, de-industrialize and thrive.